Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
It is a joyous day in Nash County today, the subject matter we're on, so we're going to do that one more time. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good evening.
Much better. I appreciate everyone being here today. It's a day that we've been looking forward to for quite a while. And it is customary for our board to begin each of our meetings with an invocation and then a pledge of allegiance to the flag. When we do the invocation by a commissioner, you're welcome to stand and join us, those that are able to stand. You're welcome to use this time to have your own prayer if you like, or you're certainly welcome to use it for a moment of silence that whatever may be on your mind or your heart today. And at this time, I'd like to call on Commissioner Mary Wells, and Mary, you'll find to remain seated if you like to do the invocation, and then Vice Chair Wayne Outlaw will lead us in the pledge. Thank you.
Talk about the future of Nash County. God, the way we want to go, the way you want us to go, and the way we should go. But God, we just cannot put this virus behind us. We just ask you, God, that you be with us as we keep walking through it. God, thank you so much for protecting our employees, our staff, and God, most of all, for protecting the people. God, just be with us as we work through these things. May we remember that we're only one group, that we represent all of Nash County. And God, that we want to do what's right for everyone. So God, just be with us as we go through this meeting. Be with each presenter. Be with us and give us open ears to listen. And God, just bless this meeting. In your name I pray.
Amen.
Amen.
Would you join us in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We're now on item number 4 on the agenda, if you're following us by the agenda. And it's my pleasure to be able to call on Andy Hagee this morning, or this afternoon, to do the welcome and instructions for us. And Andy, I thought I saw you. We are glad to have you back, sir. Andy had a little bit of bump in the road a couple of weeks ago, but pleased to have him back. I'll turn it over to you, sir. And you can remain seated if you need to. I'm kidding with you.
Not that bad.
Not that bad. Great.
No, it's good to be back, and I thank everybody for their thoughts and prayers, and a little bump in the road, nothing major. But I hope you did enjoy the Duke Energy Site Readiness presentation.
We did.
It was a very good program, very good exercise for us all, and it's good to have 2 Duke Ready site certifications in the county. But I'll kick us off. As you said, this is a special day for us and for Nash County's Economic Development Program. And I want to start out with, again, good afternoon, and want to welcome everyone. I'm excited to present to you this afternoon one of the key components of the county's Economic Development Program, the Nash County Economic Development Strategic Plan. The purpose of the plan is to provide a strategic roadmap and guide the county's economic development focus, actions, and investments now and into the future. We know that economic development is vital to the enhancing of our quality of life, and that the businesses we retain, grow, attract are essential to the future of Nash County. By working collectively on these issues, through the immediate, short, and long-term actions in this plan, we have the power to move the county forward, while at the same time we recognize that the plan's results rely on sufficient resources and effective partnerships. A county-wide commitment to the plan's objectives will enable progress that we could not achieve alone. Successful economic development requires local, regional, and state collaboration and an alignment with a variety of partners, such as the Research Triangle Regional Partnership and the Economic Development Partnership in North Carolina. The plan highlights areas where the county will lead and the areas where we will support efforts by complementing the work done by valued partner organizations and businesses. The plan's strategies provide direction and flexibility as new opportunities and needs become apparent. Good plans begin with listening and with stakeholders and staff providing extensive comments, ideas, and initiatives, which help create an even brighter future for Nash County. The Nash County Economic Development Team wishes to extend their sincere gratitude to all assisted in shaping this vision for the county's future. I want to recognize the county commissioners, county administration, department heads, community stakeholders, and businesses for their leadership and vision. And I especially want to recognize our hardworking economic development team, Susan and Emily. Will y'all stand, please? We put a lot of time in this, and they've done a great job. This strategic plan provides not just a vision, but most importantly, an actionable vision for economic development growth in Nash County. So we invite all who want to elevate and enhance Nash County's position in the state, national, and global economy to join us in making our community an even more vibrant place in which to live, work, prosper, and enjoy. And now I would like to introduce Ted Abernathy, Managing Partner with Economic Leadership, to present the full overview of Nash County's Economic Development Strategic Plan. Ted has 39 years of experience in directing economic and workforce development programs. We have enjoyed working with Ted and his staff for several months now. And besides Nash County and communities throughout North Carolina, Ted is currently working in more than a dozen other states to develop economic strategies. Ted has worked with 8 state chambers of commerce and more than a dozen county and regional organizations to develop strategic plans. Born in Dallas, North Carolina, Ted received his bachelor's degree from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, his master's at Johns Hopkins University, is a graduate of the Economic Development Institute, and is an Eisenhower Fellow for Global Economics. So please give a warm welcome to Ted Abernathy.
Raise.
That's the way we work over here, sir.
We'll try hard not to fight that thing, so it'll be good. Thank you all for having me today. Appreciate it, Mr. Chairman.
We thank you for being here, sir.
I think that you all have had copies for a few days of the plan, so I'm going to go through today and talk to you about what we did for the viewers and the other people here, and then I'm going to spend most of my time on the end on the recommendations. But as we go through this, the staff asked us for quite a few things. We started with an economic overview of the county, taking a look at it as an outsider would look at it, as opposed to an insider. We did a workforce analysis, and I'll tell you a little about that, a targeted industry study. We also did a housing analysis. As Andy said, I've been doing this a long time. Until 3 years ago, I'd never done a housing analysis for an economic development plan, and now we do one with every plan because it's become infrastructure for new businesses coming in because labor's become so important. We looked at best practices for incentive policies and made recommendations about that. And then we looked a little at the organizational capacity that y'all recently created. We put all of that together and then came up with a group of recommendations to try to make this startup, if you will, as close to being on the line as we can. We also started all of this by talking to people throughout the county. Some of you were interviewed. We talked to business owners in the county. We talked to mayors, talked to a little bit of everybody. And I think the overview started when stakeholders told us that there were a lot of things that they found positive in the region. Your location was good, your proximity to the Raleigh-Durham area. Raleigh is the second fastest growing metro in America. Right now, we do work for the Raleigh Chamber and have for a decade, and they've continued to grow, and they're growing east more now than any time in their past. Good health care here, good training activities. When we talked to your stakeholders, they were worried a little bit about broadband infrastructure. They were worried about natural gas. They're worried about water and sewer to some new sites that might be available for work. But we looked overall, and it was a good product that needed a little more work to keep it getting stronger and stronger. Your population had been growing for decades. It flattened out a little at the beginning of the last decade. It's on its way back up now. We looked at your largest industries. Manufacturing continues to be a real strong industry for you guys, and you also have some of the industries associated with your location east of Raleigh and along 95, accommodations, food service, those types of things. We also looked at some of the industries where you're underrepresented. Many of them are in the white-collar fields, and so you don't have as many office users as would be typical of size. So building some more of those white-collar, especially professional and technical services jobs would be good for you over the long haul. When we look at a place for competitiveness, and we do site selection also for some companies, so we know what they look at. They basically look at three sets of things. They look at, first, labor. Can you provide them the talent with the skills that they need? Second is infrastructure. Can you give them the water, sewer, broadband, housing, buildings and sites that they need? And the third is whether the business climate's good. Do you have a good taxation? Is your regulatory process good? Is your process for approvals good? All of those types of a good legal environment. Good news for you is the state of North Carolina is known as one of the top places for business climate in America. So you're going to get a lot of looks that way, and then it's going to come down to the local level. This year, the 34th year that they've surveyed all the site selectors and asked what the most important things were, highway accessibility is number one. It has been number one off and on throughout all this period of time. But the next three in line have to do with people. It's the availability and cost of labor, and whether you have a quality of life where people can attract new people, new workers to come here. And so we spend a lot of time on the workforce side of this when we go look at this. This study came out this week, actually. It was released at the International Economic Development Conference last Thursday. Their top thing was skilled worker and labor costs, and then quality of life was up there too, but also the availability of buildings and sites that are ready to go. And in today's world, a building and site means today. Means you're ready to mow the grass and start the building, or you're ready to move in. And that's different. And I can tell you that, having done this for a long time, used to be that, we're telling someone, well, we're on the sewer plan, we can extend it out, it's no problem. That used to work. Nowadays, it doesn't. Nowadays, it has to be ready to go. So we always look at building and sites through that lens. Workforce analysis is the topic that's number one on most people's mind, but it's also one of the most complicated issues. We released last week a new statewide plan for Kansas. We've done one for, I think, 11 states now. And when people say, business says, I need workers with the right skills, we spend the rest of our life arguing about what those skills are. People don't know what you're talking about, by and large. And so we've developed a rubric that we think of, the first of basic skills, whether your schools are teaching the reading and writing, arithmetic, statistics, whatever it is that needs to be taught. The second are a whole series of life skills. Some people call them soft skills. Whether you have the right attitude, whether you're punctual, whether you're a self-starter, all of those all those things. The next is a group called work skills, which the reason they're soft skills also. They're communication and teamwork and the ability to adapt, but they transfer between jobs. Once you have the right life skills and work skills, you can be taught the next thing, which is the actual job skills. You can be taught how, whether or not you want to be a logistics person or whether you want to be a nurse or whatever. But you've got to have those first three, the basic underlying knowledge, the life skills, and the work skills. And so when we looked at your labor force, we started by looking at those. The final thing is the future skills. More and more, it's the ability to work with automation. It's the ability to work with different types of people. And more than anything else, it's the ability to learn and relearn because things change so quickly. So we looked at your educational levels. They're a little lower here than they are in the state of North Carolina. You have more people with just a high school degree and fewer people with a college degree. It's one of the reasons probably that your white-collar job numbers are low. We looked at overall what your high school graduation, and that's pretty good numbers, but school systems have room for improvement. We also looked at your labor shed in terms of, if I'm an employer coming here, what is my available labor? And in the county, it's about 43,000. But that's not the way people think about it. People talk about drive times or labor sheds. And so we did an analysis for the team of a labor shed of a 45-minute drive time. We used this building actually as the center. And for 45-minute drive time from here, it's 132,000 people. So if you're trying to recruit a business, it's not the 43 that's in your community, and I understand those are your citizens and are important, but it's that 132. The last 3 that we've done, people have said, well, give us a 35-mile drive time. People will drive 45 miles for a good job, and they will. And in 45 miles from here, you have just over 1 million in your labor force. And so when Andy's out selling this area, the answer is look at the labor force broadly. Train it locally. Try to get as many people local as you can and get them quick commuting out, come back in, but look at it broadly. So we put a lot of that information. We looked at the occupations that were growing in the area and provided that information. Fastest growing occupations are in transportation and logistics, projections over the next 10 years. Last 5 years, over 500 new jobs in that area. And then we looked at your college, your community college, and what everything was that they were training in. We looked at Wesleyan, at North Carolina Wesleyan, and what they were training in. And then we even went down and looked at your CTE classes, your career and technical education classes at the local schools. Put all of that in there. The good news is the community college looks like their classes are very responsive to the local labor market. We heard almost all good things in response to how the community college was reacting to businesses. But if we can continue to provide through the Economic Development Office what the occupational growth is going to be, then they can anticipate those classes. We hear all the time about community colleges. It's not quite as fast to put up a new program as businesses are, but good response here and good reviews from the people there. We then were asked, what should we be targeting with our marketing dollars? And I always start by telling everybody, you can only target whatever you have enough arrows to shoot at. So we wanted to get smaller than bigger. We looked at all your clusters. Clusters are groups of industries that are together through their supply chains, their training and others. We mapped all of that out in terms of asset clusters for you, in terms of legacy clusters. What are the most important things for you? Provided you the information on which clusters were growing, which ones were shrinking, which ones you had a high concentration in, and what the salaries were for all of those. Looked at all of those in terms of fastest growing along the way, highest concentration, and then projected employment change over the next 5 years. We also then took into account that you had joined the Research Triangle Regional Partnership, and we looked at their targeted clusters and also the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina, and that's what's up there now. And, RTRP has 5 areas that they focus on. EDP-NC has 10 that they focus on. You're going to get a lot of your recommendations from there. A lot of the people who will come in through the region or through the states. We want to try to align that. And we ended up with those 5 areas for you. Not surprising, a couple of them. You're very strong in biopharmaceuticals, and we think you should continue to be focused on that. You're very strong in value-added agriculture. You have a long history of it, but you also have growth in those areas. When we think about reshoring in America, what's going to happen post-pandemic, those are 2 of the 3 areas that we think will have the most impact coming back into the U.S. Defense technologies is the 3rd, but everything associated with biopharmaceuticals, including medical devices, is in the 1st bucket, and then 2nd is that value-added food. coming back to America. And so we think these are two. Technology and instruments are the third. We think that's a manufacturing area that you will have some strength in. You're growing now in distribution and e-commerce. BIC 95 gives you a great opportunity, so we think you should continue that. We know that distribution doesn't create a lot of jobs, but it does create tax base, and then it does create the ability for your other companies to have that local, which gives them an advantage. And then finally, construction products and services is a growth area that you've had over the last few years. Some of that is the triangle, the construction part of the triangle spreads out. It's too expensive, land's too expensive in the core. So it moves out. I think I'm, 42 miles from downtown Raleigh right now? That's not too far. And considering that the triangle has started pushing more east and southeast, then you're in a good place for that. So those are the 5 targeted areas that we came up with. We also then looked, as I said, at a housing analysis. I know you're going to get some more housing stuff today, but your stakeholders thought that the best thing about your housing was it was affordable. The worst thing was that you had a lot of areas that were lower rental areas and that were not in the best shape, and you weren't getting a broad range of housing that you wanted to get, not at the upper middle end or the higher end. We looked at your housing units. They're growing. You know that you have pressure in the western part of the county for growth. You're going to continue to have that pressure. So being ready for that's important. You have now fewer multifamily than would be typical in North Carolina and more mobile homes than would be typical. Over time, as your values go up, that's probably going to change some. So you're going to have to be thinking about how you're going to accommodate everyone as you go forward. We looked at your owner-occupied housing. A lot of your owner-occupied housing is concentrated in the under 200,000 range, 3/4 of it. Not a lot of housing at the upper range. So your value numbers for your housing are pretty low, and we certainly made a recommendation that you have more mixed use and get a little bit higher end to try to attract some of those professionals that will be looking to move out of the eastern side of Wake County. We also looked at the year that your housing was built, and you're getting a lot of new housing, but most of your housing is older. And the trick to older housing is it's hard to recruit young people to old housing. And I know this sounds crazy, but young people have this list of things in their head. I have 2 30-somethings, so I can speak a little bit about them. But until about 2005, we actually didn't build open plan housing with en suites and master closets and none of that. That wasn't the way houses were built. And today, that's what young people want when they move into their housing. And so if you don't have a newer stock, then you're less likely to get younger people. And we're all trying to attract that young worker to our area. That's what our companies are looking for. They're technologically savvy. They're heavily adaptable. And so looking at new housing was a piece. We also looked that your housing has been growing over the last couple of years. You're getting more permanent value. You know that. You're sitting here feeling that. And the value has been going up some. And those are both good signs for you. We also looked at the year that people moved into their housing units. You've had 39% of the people occupying your homeowners have moved in the last decade. So you've got some turnover here, and there's a lot of new people in the county. And then this chart's in there, I'll let you play with it, but what we look at is, we look at your incomes and what value of house you can afford comfortably with your incomes. And what we find in your area is a lot more housing at the lower end than the incomes would dictate. So a lot of people are paying less for their housing, that's a good thing, but very few housing for people at the upper end. So there are a lot of people at the upper salary ends in your area that don't have housing that fits them as much. Now they're still here, but over time that's an issue, and you should look at that. We looked at your rental rates, and just like every county we do work in, if you're looking at whether or not there's affordability in housing, the rental part is what really hurts everybody. Is lower income people, they pay a lot higher percentage of their dollar to rental housing than homeowners pay to housing. And that's true in your area too. So we looked at all of those type of things, looked at the rentals versus and made some recommendations along that. Last thing I just put up there on housing is that the new study was out on what the most important factor for people moving into areas is, and that most important factor is the cost of living and housing costs. That's new in the last few years. It's not the availability of a job anymore, it's the availability of finding a house I can live in. And that's why when you hear people are moving out of New York or San Francisco or Seattle, it's that affordability number that's starting to make a difference to 30-year-olds that it didn't used to. We look closely at incentive policy best practices. We think it's important for communities to have an incentive policy, but we want a written incentive policy that is flexible. And so we added a lot of things in the report that told you best practices around incentives, what a good policy has and doesn't have, how you should be measuring every deal, what the cost benefits are of those deals, and how they can adjust that policy as they go forward. We gave you a long list of best practices around the country. We've done a lot of work on incentives, and there's 16 factors to look at, and we think that you should develop that. One of the reasons is that when people are looking at your website, we'll talk about this in a few minutes, the number one thing they're looking for, the first thing that site selectors say they look for is an incentive policy. And if you don't have one, then sometimes you get off the list pretty quickly. We then looked at your organization, what you've created with the Economic Development Department. Stakeholders, first of all, are very excited by the idea of having a local economic development program. Congratulations on doing that. I think a lot of people very happy about that. The concern is that there's there could be some confusion in the marketplace with the Carolinas Gateway Partnership, and they want to make sure that that doesn't happen, especially with the site selection community and others. And so that's going to take ongoing work, and we know that. The town officials that we talked to all the mayors, and they're excited, and they have a list of things they want you to help them with, as you might have guessed. I bet you've heard a few of them. I now know them. We also know that you're doing some new comprehensive planning and a new SEDS with your Council of Government, and both of those need to be integrated with this work, or this needs to be modified to integrate it with that, whatever you feel is necessary. They wanted measurable goals, and then finally, they just wanted people to work together closely and try to send a message that Nash County can be a great place for people to do business. We looked at best practices for EDCs, Economic Development Organizations, EDOs, and they tend to be really driven by a strong strategic plan, but they're team sports. You'll hear that a lot in economic development. Your water and sewer people, your planning people, your elected people are as important as the staff is to being successful. And so all of those things become part of this. We looked at the best marketing techniques, websites, and personal visits are up there. There's room for improvement in both of those categories. We looked at what was most important on a website. Hopefully, with a redo sometime in the future, you'll add a few things. And the reason is that when a company is looking these days, they don't talk to the local economic developers until they're shortlisted. And they go through that website to get you shortlisted. Only 30% in the initial screening talk to anybody locally. And so that's your front door. We want to make sure that front door is as shiny and welcoming as possible. We also then went through a checklist that we have on organizational excellence, what makes economic developers and organizations work the best possible. We did a full checklist on that. Adopting targeted industry and a strategic plan will be part of what you do there, but building those institutional alliances with your towns, with the people around your community will be a key. And then finally, we gave a list of the traditional performance metrics that you might look at. I think that as elected officials, most of you are looking for return on investment on everything you do these days. And so how do you measure that with your economic development organization? We think a county dashboard is coming in your future so that you can just look and see how that's all happening. So then we took all of that and we created 27 strategies around, 27 recommendations around a few strategies. The first is getting that alignment of the county and the municipal leadership in the area. through a coalition. We think that there's ways for Andy to build a more in-depth advisory committee. We think there's work to be done in social media for you. I don't know if y'all have done this, but if you Google Nash County and start looking, it's an interesting mix. There's no real theme, but if you did a social media audit, you would probably find out where your strengths and weaknesses were in the cyber world. And unfortunately, and today that's your front door. We think there's some more work to do on the community branding, and we think that can again be done online. And then start beginning to create an understanding of what the Economic Development Office is doing in the county by having some events in the county and more stakeholder work here. We think there's more work to do on the product in the county. The product is the sum of all of the infrastructure and the buildings and such. We think that mixed-use zoning, as you look at your new zoning in the coming years, more mixed use, more mixed housing zonings where you're going to have some more upper income housing, but it's mixed with your businesses will be important. We think that there's a infrastructure confusion out there on what really you have and what's really served and how much there is and all of that. And that doesn't necessarily mean y'all are confused or your infrastructure people, but it means market doesn't really know. There's some belief that some of your sites don't have the water and sewer that's needed or don't have the broadband that's necessary. So whatever it is, you need to make sure that it's out there. We also looked at what to do from a marketing standpoint. We think that the move that you've already made to market to the urban core is absolutely the first move that we would have made if we'd have made a recommendation. People that are looking in the triangle and then looking out for a little bit don't want to be in the core. That's your biggest target because they've got the branding piece that starts this, but also building those relationships with the Economic Development Partnership as they're coming to the state. North Carolina is one of only 3 states to show up as the best place to do business on everybody's list. Texas and Utah are the other 2. So North Carolina is going to get a lot of looks. It'll be helpful if you do that. Eventually, you should enhance the site and building inventory and the website and do a little more social media. We think you ought to help directly the businesses and the towns. We know Susan already does some of that and has for a while. More robust business assistance portal on the website makes sense for people to be able to find out information without having to call. We think that'll help a little bit. Talking to your businesses regularly. A business retention and expansion survey annually would make sense, and especially a small business survey to find out how y'all are doing. Real good work on projections of occupations with your community college and with your local school systems would be helpful. And then we think the cooperative extension, you've already got a little bit of presence in farmers markets here. Everybody'd like a little bit more, I think, and with your background in the county, having some agricultural presence in each of the towns would be a good thing. They'd like it, and I think that makes sense. And then finally, the organization itself, we think, can be a best in class. It's 3 people, so we know the limitations of it as it is now, but a communication plan would be necessary. Over time, some private resources to supplement the public resources. That's year 2, 3 out in the plan, but to help with those marketing. Right now, once you do the internal marketing, the stuff you're doing in the urban area and the work you're doing with RTRP, you really have very limited amounts of funds left. Long term, you need to be able to do some of that direct, go visit people, host events, go see site selectors. It's not a lot of money, but year 2, 3, 4, it's a little bit of money going forward. We want them to eventually get to be IEDC, which is the highest accreditation, so that people look at the organization with an understanding that it is a very professional, top-of-the-line organization. There's only a few in the state. We think that's there. And then the staff training to continue to invest in them over time. When we put a timetable in there, there's a few things in the first year, we tried to make it so that the things that were most important, you try to do year one with the money that you currently have in the budget and don't do anything different. Year two, you add a few more reaches in there. And by year three, we hope that the budget expands a little bit for the marketing side of this and the support to the towns. But that involves in year one, building that coalition with town leaders and you guys to make sure you're on the same page with all of this. So I'll stop with that. It's a big report. There's a lot, you asked for a lot of stuff, and so we tried to add a lot into it. The good news is that we get to do this with a lot of organizations. You built something that's already on firm footing. This gives it a little more direction on what it needs to do. I think that if I were looking at this region, and I got to spend about a decade as the Executive Vice President of the Research Triangle Regional Partnership, if I were looking now, this is the direction that growth's headed. We did Johnston County's plan about 7 years ago, and then again about 3 years ago. We thought it was heading toward Johnston at that time, and that seems to have worked out. We've done Harnett, we've done Chatham's, but clearly now not as much heading south and more heading east, and so be ready for that. You need to be really prepared for what I think will be a real push on residential in the western part of the county. I think that's going to be a key for all of you to make sure that you get what you're looking for out there. And then over time, build those sites that are the most attractive to business and keep them as sort of business sites along 95 and other areas that will help you going forward. And I'll be happy to answer questions for as long as you'd like. Thank you.
Ted, if you could, you may want to turn around, but I'm sitting here and looking at all these people with masks. I can tell who some of them are. I can't tell who all of them are.
Yes.
But I think we're all interested in who's here today, and I hope nobody doesn't mind, but I'm going to take just a second to go down through the people and let them introduce themselves and tell what their jobs are. And Mr. Lamb, if you would start right here, and Dion, when it gets to you, or from that side, if you would just continue back up front, I think it would certainly help the board some to know who's here today, and certainly for the record. Mr. Lamb?
I'm Z. Lamb, County Manager. I've been here about 6.5, 7 years.
Janice Evans, Clerk to the Board.
John Boone, Orton County Director of Public Utility Facilities, licensed Long Branch County native, and
Chris Catalano, I'm the Executive Director of Planning and Engagement for Nash County Public Schools.
Little Roy Lewis, I'm the mayor of Town Millsets, and I've lived there just about all my life.
Ron Campbell, I'm the Director of Planning and Development Services of the Upper Coastal Plains Council of Governments. The SEDS was mentioned today, and we are starting a COVID-19 economic development response effort you all will be hearing about and hopefully partnering on.
Good afternoon, Ben Farmer.
Melissa Vandermark, Director of Career Training at Community College.
Michael Williams, Attorney Farmer, Post Development.
I'm Nancy Nixon, I retired last year as Planning Director there, so I'm still interested.
Sandy Hall, North Carolina Cooperative Extension.
Alan Barbee, Springfield Chamber of Commerce, lifelong resident of Nash County.
Sarah Teacom, I'm now with the town of Nashville, and I'm a resident of Bertie County, so I just started with the town of Nashville a couple of weeks ago.
Alex Lewis, Business Development Manager, Edwards Incorporated.
Clarice Bissett, I'm retired, but I give most of my time to the Springfield Chamber of Commerce.
Jay Kemp, Town Manager, Spring Oak. Dion Benji, around Wilson Regional Airport Director. And we're back at Creek Children Operation.
Congratulations.
Glenn DePalma, General Manager of the Poppies International with Whitaker Park and Food. These are business.
like nothing. And I'm gonna keep on doing nothing.
I'll lay it out in just a bit.
David Evans, business owner, Bailey, North Carolina.
I'm Walter Wells. I'm a 20-year resident of Bailey. I'm also chair of the Town of Bailey's Planning Board.
Larry Taylor, Town Councilman, Town Manager.
Sherry Moss, planning director, fairly new, town manager.
I'm Tom Eldridge. I'm a commercial real estate broker in Raleigh, and my clients are definitely interested in this area, moving down here because there's not a lot left in Wake County.
I'm Adam Tyson. I'm the Nash County Planning and Inspections Director.
Steve Ellis, Superintendent, Nash County Public Schools for, I think, 7 months now.
How's it been so far?
COVID.
I was going to say, it's a really bad 7 months.
I'm Donna White, Nash County Finance Director.
Emily Moore, Economic Development Administrative Assistant.
Susan Phelps, part of the Economic Development Team for Nash County.
Vince Durham, I'm the Nash County Attorney for the last 29 years, I believe.
Stacy Schatzer, Assistant County Manager, and I've been with the county for 20 years.
And I do appreciate you doing that. And of course, each one of the commissioners represent a district, and we have our names out front. If I ask them to stand and say that, I'll be in trouble. So I think everybody knows who we are. If not, we have the name tags. But at this time, I'd first like to open it up to the Board of Commissioners to see if you have any questions from Ted about this very exciting study that we've been given. It appears to me you have given us a lot of homework, first of all, and I certainly going to spend some more time studying the timetable that you feel like we need to work on to complete that homework. But I'm sure we'll want to have you back at some point to just grade us, if nothing else, to see how we're doing.
Well, I think I speak for Andy, but he'll correct me if I don't. We gave this to you as a final draft. If there are changes that you need made, we will continue to do that. So we don't spring them on county commissioners who fund things and say this is it. So if you've got issues, please let us know.
Questions from the board?
Yep.
Mr. Belfield.
You started off, mentioned white collar jobs, and then later on you got into the blue collar. I see the two feeding off of each other. Am I correct there?
They can. Right now, so what we measure is based on your population where you have more jobs or less jobs than would be average. And you certainly have more blue-collar jobs than would be average and less white-collar. What you've got right now is not a lot of white-collar product. There's not a lot of office buildings that's sitting around empty in the area, and you haven't been able to attract as much there. But in fairness to you, the blue collar is not really blue collar anymore. It's tech collar, if you will. So people keep telling me to call it golf collar because you get to wear your golf shirt into the blue collar evidently. But I think that there's room to build some white collar, especially for young professionals, some back office, some other things here that would diversify your economy a little. You're heavy into manufacturing. That's a good thing. We like manufacturing areas, but it puts you in real trouble if there's a downturn in manufacturing. And they tend to do that. And so your new manufacturing jobs have been great. They've been much higher wages than your previous ones, and that's good. You're moving into areas that are not as likely to shrink, but you want a little more diversity into it. That's all.
Well, I would think that, tell me if I'm wrong on this, in my observation, blue-collar jobs the people in those jobs tend to be more stable and put in the community than white-collar jobs because they get transferred. Most white-collar workers usually move 2 or 3 times before they get to the age of retirement. So they may be in and out, or the company move them somewhere else, which they get promotions. And that's what make me think that blue collar and white collar jobs kind of, to keep it stable, need to feed off of one another. In support of one another, because it takes white collar employees to run the big companies. And then I've heard some argument that you ought not to have a manufacturer that's employing 3,000 and 5,000 people, because if they have a downturn, they got to lay off thousands of them, which is not good for the community. So to me, it seems like it ought to be a balance there.
You know, I agree with you, and if you'll remember, the 5 areas we suggested that you target are almost all blue collar. So they're logistics, they're pharma and manufacturing, they're food processing and ag. So I think we agree with your assessment that they fit your population pretty well.
And I think we have a great opportunity for ag processing, ag research for this area, because basically Eastern North Carolina is heavy agriculture.
Agreed.
In the first place, and there's a great opportunity there. And there was something else I wrote down there. Oh, this is something I've been saying to our board all along, regional economic development, and I think it's kind of in your recommendation there too, that you can read that in there. It may not be specifically saying that, but regional economic development, you can come up with more resources to improve and promote economic development. And I'd like to hear you comment on that, because I'm not sure a lot of people in this area are sold on that.
Yeah, I think the way I look at these type of issues are how clients look at them. So for better or worse, most clients draw circles on maps. They don't do county lines or city lines. And they look at quality of life issues, and they look at business climate issues, and they look at labor force issues. And then they find buildings and sites, and then they end up in half dozen of the people that introduce themselves office saying, all right, tell me about the water and sewer capacity, tell me about the building and site, tell me about the zoning process. So it starts at a bigger level and it works its way down. I think that when I was talking about labor shed, it's important for people to have many numbers in the labor shed as possible, because they want the biggest labor pool they can get. So I agree with your general position that lots of things are regional in nature. You won't get into the pipeline without the region getting into the pipeline, but you won't get to the finish line without it being right in Nash County. So big funnel, you got to get here, and the point of sale is it's still here. Point of interest is at the big level.
It has to be the nucleus.
Yep, agreed.
And draw in.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Okay. One area that you mentioned too, business climate. This is one that I think we really need to do some work on to make it more business friendly. I'm not saying it's not now, but I see we need to improve on it.
Yeah, we did not get, in talking to your stakeholders, we did not get a lot of complaints about business regulation around here or speed. But we did put in there that you should do an evaluation. You want certainty and speed as much as you can to still meet what you want to do. You have, it's your community, and you should have the ability to try to get what you want in it. But we always say no fast, and be as certain as you can be about what is and isn't possible in a community. The good news for you is the three big business climate issues tend to be taxation at the state level, corporate taxation, regulation, and legal environment. And they tend to be at the state level, and they're all good. North Carolina does well on all of those things. And so you start out with positive thought process. Then you go into the question of, how certain is my zoning and my regulatory here? How fast is my processes? And how certain is my process? The real danger is that you create more risk for a client. And today, with COVID and a global recession and political things the way they are, risk is a big problem in business today. There's a lot of uncertainty. So you want to be the place that's as certain as possible.
Yeah, I think it's a good report, and it's a challenge for us to move forward.
Other commissioners have questions or points they'd like to make?
I'll just ask one question. When you talk about creating a county incentive policy and putting it on your website, what does that look like? Is that specific or is that general in nature? And how does a county like Nash, which compared to Wake, we're at somewhat of a disadvantage in terms of being able to provide maybe the incentives that they could, how do you compete in that market?
Yeah, so incentives traditionally are not the deciding factor until the very end, and rarely is it the fact that the largest incentive always wins. So what we suggested is that you decide what's important to you. Is it tax base? Is it the level of wages? Is it location? And you create a policy that creates a range of what you would consider at your board that would be in there. And that gives a client an idea of what the range is. Doesn't commit you. There's no entitlement. We don't believe in incentive entitlements. Just because you get 2 points for this and 3 points for that, you get 7, and that doesn't mean, it means that if you got that, y'all would consider between here and here. Whatever's comfortable for you. You're not trying to you're not trying to beat Wake. I think we included Transylvania does a good job of this. Catawba does a good job. That's a fairly, comparable county. And they've gone through these and created a policy that doesn't mean that every time someone comes to you, you start from zero. It really helps the manager. It really helps the economic developer so that when they're talking to a potential client, they're not either making it sound like there's nothing or that there's everything. They're giving them realistic understanding of what the range is. If you create this many jobs at this much wages with this much tax base, commissioners traditionally would consider between here and here. And it's written because one of the problems, as y'all know, any type of incentive is controversial with the public, always is. This gives it, there's full transparency. Everybody can see it. You've acted on the policy, but not on, well before an individual thing comes. But it doesn't, I think this is really important, Commissioner, it doesn't prohibit you from doing anything because you get to make final decision here with a vote. And that's what we want you to do. But we want to send the message on this is the way we typically will consider this, and we want you to think about it before there's a deal. So there's a whole list of things that you should think about. We did the training for the County Commissioners Association last year on incentive policies, and it really is about creating a range to give you guidance, but not to commit you one way or another, and we don't want to do that. And you shouldn't get into a bidding war with, somebody else. Most of the incentives are going to be state incentives anyway. You're going to have to do some matching. You're going to have to do some things probably around infrastructure, maybe buildings. We did a study for Johnston County a while back looking at what everybody around the area was doing in terms of building and sites. It's a wide range from people who don't do it at all to people who will give you the land and the building. So
taxation and regulation would be two key areas you would think.
Regulation is certainly there. Taxes in North Carolina, typically local property taxes are a fairly narrow band. They'll be important. They won't be as important as the cost of labor or and depending on the industry, electricity or power cost. But they'll be part of the.
Did you get a chance to evaluate our regulations?
No, we didn't go through a regulatory evaluation. We suggested that y'all do that, but, yeah.
We're working very hard on broadband.
Yep.
So how critical do you think broadband is if Wake County is moving east to those people to have access to broadband?
Critical. We're doing the new strategic plan for the Golden Leaf Foundation now, and we've been interviewing stakeholders all over North Carolina. It's what everybody says.
It would be one of the number one needs for children, for work, et cetera.
You know, that's the difference, is it's for everybody.
Yeah.
It will be unlikely that you will get anyone age 35 to move into a house that doesn't have access to broadband. It'll be almost impossible for a business to move into a site that doesn't have broadband.
All right, I got one final question.
Sure.
The people, the gentleman here from Wake that's looking at Nash, the people that are coming from Wake, I assume they're working in Wake, and they're just looking a place to live where they have lower taxes, et cetera, I don't know. But when you talk about an upper end home for those people.
Yeah, so he's not people living, he's looking for commercial land.
All right, well, when you talk about those people that are moving, would possibly move into Nash from a Wake or whatever, and you talk about upper end housing, what range are you talking about?
I'm not talking about.
Because we've got a lot of home construction going on in the southern part of the county, well, soon anyway.
Yeah, I think the answer is the next step up. So the next step up for you is, your planning director probably tell me better, but 275 to 4, is that the next step up?
That's pretty close.
Yeah. So if you go back 10 years to Johnston County, if you go back 20 years to Johnston County, what you had was a lot of lower end tract housing moving out. Right. We need to work in Wake or Durham. We can't afford the housing. We're going to go out here. We're going to get something a little cheaper. But 10 years later, those houses got to be bigger. And now what happened is the businesses are all around them. So that's why Johnston County has done what it's done. For you, you get to decide, y'all are the county commissioners, how much of what do you want as you go through your zoning regs. But you want mixed. You don't want all one type of housing. So I'm not suggesting you just approve all higher end housing, but you want a mix of housing. And then you also want commercial at the best sites, because you want both. You're the county. Counties, you got to fund schools. So you need the commercial tax base and the residential tax base in North Carolina. Towns, residential, you can live on for a long time in towns in North Carolina, but you guys pay for those schools, need that commercial also.
Well, you spoke about our community college. Did you have any evaluation of our public school system?
We looked at your school system. We looked mostly at your career and technical education. We looked overall, but we weren't asked to do an evaluation of the outcomes of your school. I know them because we do some education work.
Do you find a good working relationship between the community college and the public school system with the CTE program and that sort of thing?
I did. At least I didn't hear any negatives. So, I mean, I think people are here that could answer that more than me, but I didn't hear a lot of negatives, and I heard a lot of positives about CTEs in the local system. It's not a huge program. It looks like it's a pretty good program, but not very big, and we would certainly recommend that it grow, especially with business connections. But the community college looked like that the courses that they had matched up really well with the business community you have, and what we heard from business leaders is that they were responsive and listened and did what they could to meet that. So,
final question.
Sure.
Do you think our staff dealing with this particular subject is adequate?
With economic development?
Yes.
It's adequate for today, but if you implement everything that I recommended, you're probably going to need one more person in the next 3 years.
Thank you.
Yep.
Ms. Richardson, any questions?
No.
Dan?
I got one. Do you see our industrial development? We've got sites all over the county. Do you think the sites we've got are adequate today for people that are looking commercial places, or we need somewhere else, another industrial site, say, closer to Raleigh?
Yeah, it's a good question, Commissioner. I think that if you had more sites that were served by water and sewer in the western part of the county, it would help. I think that you also need some buildings that are a few different sizes than you currently have. You have some, but having one or two of anything in a commercial competitive market always inflates the price a little bit. It's always a little tough. If someone's in the audience who has one of those buildings, sorry, but a little bit more would be better.
Sue? Okay. I would be not serving our county well if I didn't ask, but we have many partners here in the room. I'd first like to ask if any of those partners have a question or a comment for Ted, if I could. It shouldn't take too long to do that. Anyone in the audience that would like to bring anything on your mind about economic development to us at this time? And we will be having future meetings, of course, but sure, Ted won't always be here. Anyone?
One thing I'd like to mention was, in your report, I noticed that you were talking about you need to have water and sewer in place.
Yes.
And I don't know how the county, if they have programs for towns such as Springville to help with that. I know it's a large burden for a small town to try to do that by themselves.
That would be a subject matter we could certainly work on together.
I'd just add that we dealt on a call, I guess it was Friday, with the senatorial staff in D.C., and they really do expect in January the first major infrastructure bill, I guess in 25 years in America, that would be targeted at big national infrastructure, but also at programs for smaller communities. Much like, for those of you who are old enough, much like the programs that were around in the 60s and 70s into the 80s. Right. So I would have my list ready, just in case. I would go ahead and figure out what I needed to make my locations ready to go. Problem is really simple today. If you're not ready, then that creates a gap, and businesses just don't do it anymore. They want to make sure it's real.
Yes, sir.
We're in that western part of the county and in Bailey, and as you're aware, we're making no movement because of our sewer moratorium. So, and we've got the highway coming by, we've got the interchange, et cetera. So, I know from our standpoint, we would love to work with the county, the state, whomever else we can work with to try and overcome this to build capacity so that when these businesses are ready, which they already are, we're way behind the curve here. But unless we get started, we'll never get there. So we would appreciate the help from the county and from the state in this regard.
Thank you. Other comments from partners?
Mr. Abernathy, I'm interested in your thoughts on the economic impact of the future expansion of 587 corridor through the area as it progresses.
Yeah. So the number one issue on the slide that I had up, I know I went through pretty quick. Number one issue for site selectors this year was access to a major highway. There are crazy software packages all around now for site location that just eliminates everything that's more than a quarter of a mile from an interstate. And a lot of people use them. And so having something that's designated that way will open up a large part of the county that isn't currently going to end up on those things. So very important.
Okay. Anyone else before I go to our county staff? County staff questions? Comments?
My only question is the white collar, blue collar. The definition obviously has changed in the last 40 years. It was more simplistic back in the day. The DMV coming here, 400 jobs.
It'll change it, yeah.
That's more white.
It's white
that's
collar.
Considered white collar, not blue collar.
It is.
Okay.
And it'll make it'll change your numbers, They'll show up in white collar, they'll show up in government as opposed to professional service, finance and insurance, all the other white collar jobs. They'll show up in government, but they'll add a different flavor to the mix in the community, and I think that will make a difference. But right now, you seem to be leaking some of the fundamental white collar. So that's professional services, insurance, real estate, finance. You don't have as many of those jobs as you should, which means that those dollars for those services are also going out of the county. So we're trying to figure out how to get you a little more of that local, because you won't lose as much of it's called, we don't have the leakage that we currently have of white collar jobs. I'm not trying to suggest, and we didn't recommend that you target it, but we've tried to fix the leakage.
Mm-hmm. And follow up, that movement from New Bern Avenue to the old Hardee's building, you've got a lot of people from the Raleigh area who are going to be commuting. Is it not true that as time goes on, new hires will come from a closer proximity, and some of those commuters will actually relocate to our area?
Both are true.
So
Yeah.
10, 20 years from now, it won't be an issue if they're still there.
Yeah, I think it'll be quicker than that, but yes,
Yeah.
absolutely true. Yeah.
Other staff, people?
Just wondering what you mean by value-added agriculture.
Yeah, so agriculture, the definition is anything that processes, researches, moves, or places agricultural products. So this is everything from the processing of raw materials into finished product, but also anything that moves it, cold storage counts, all of those things. So there's a value chain in value-added agriculture that North Carolina it's interesting. As a huge agricultural state, we're good at parts of value-added agriculture. And if you look at some of the growth areas, you've added some food processing in the area and some other things. I mean, it's the #1 manufacturing job area, four-digit area in North Carolina is animal slaughtering. More than biotech, more than textiles, more than anything. I mean, so producing from a live animal to a processed animal is actually manufacturing, and it's value-added agriculture. We're actually we're one of the top states for it, but it's also the #1 thing in our state, and one of the fastest growing still. So that's at the far end over here. Up here at this end would be things like production from the individual grains themselves. Value-added agriculture would include breweries, they would include wineries, they would include any of those kind of things. So anything along the value chain.
Thanks.
Sure.
Well, I don't see anything else. I paid attention probably most to your conversation about housing, probably because I'm in the construction industry and development industry myself. Mm-hmm. But I was fascinated by your comment, young people do not like old housing. I'd never had that thought, but it rings a bell with me, and I do certainly understand it. Our history in Nash County, and my question really is this wave or this changing typical? But there was a time in our past when we probably were opposite of what we are today. We probably had a proportion too many white-collar jobs. When we had major banks here, when we had major insurance companies, and when we had Hardee's national headquarters here, but then it began to change, and we shifted towards manufacturing. Does that change decade to decade, or are there other people in the state or other towns that have seen that shift in that type of, that we have seen here, which is a huge shift?
Yeah, interestingly enough, Greensboro fits that model, as does Winston-Salem. We do work in the Triad, and they used to have major banks, major insurance companies. Most of those aren't there anymore.
Right.
And so they've moved into research and logistics and other things. So yes, it's typical in North Carolina. We've seen this happen, but it's typical everywhere because white-collar consolidation was not something that used to be. It used to be a bank, if they wanted to expand, it was how many branches they could put into how many new places. Right. It's not the way that doesn't work anymore.
Absolutely
You know, we don't know if we'll have branches someday. I mean, now, you know, you sit here with your phone and make your deposit. So yes, it shifts with technology and moves around. And I said that before with the golf shirt quip, but who knows what manufacturing actually looks like? All four of my grandparents were first-generation textile workers in Gaston County, J.P. Stevens. Today, I mean, they worked in a, you know, we have pictures of them on the floor. Well, manufacturing doesn't look anything like that today. It looks like a lot of robots, and so there's as many technicians running around as there are people working on the line anymore. So yes, they do change. The skills that they need change. And white collar is changing rapidly. One of the questions we'll all have to ask post-pandemic is how many of the white collar people actually be in the office.
Right.
I mean, will we all be home or in our car? I used to say that my office was an airplane. I spent about 100 days a year on the airplane. I haven't been on an airplane since March, and I still have the same clients. They figured out he didn't have to be on the airplane. You know, we can zoom in and we're fine. It saves us money. It saves him money. I'm not sure how many more airplanes that, you know, I'm going to go back to. So yes, it changes every cycle.
Okay. I just see the retaining or getting back white-collar jobs is going to be a much more difficult task than continuing to expand our blue-collar jobs, I would think.
Yeah, I'm just looking for a little balance is all.
Yeah, I fully understand that. I do. And you're speaking about us being under the numbers with our higher-end housing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you normally see the houses come first and then the people to buy them come, or us in the building industry rather see the people come and then we don't have inventory sitting? How does that normally work in other places?
No, two things happen. One is you start out with custom builds where people are moving in and just have them built one off. But if you look at, say, Chatham County, Chatham County was mostly the northern part between Pittsburgh and Chapel Hill were mobile homes and small houses, and then all of a sudden a few developments showed up, and now everybody down there has got a college education living in a $350,000 or $400,000 house. The market was nearby, but the product wasn't there. And so there are examples where the product comes first if they see that there's a market out there. I think golf course communities came first down there with Governor's Club and a couple things, but you know, you need a developer with deep pockets to build you a new product line. Right. So if you get that, yes, but otherwise it'll start with custom homes and not spec.
Well, we are in the beginning stage of redoing our land development plan, so your comments are very timely to help us work through that. I'm sure Adam would agree with that, so I appreciate you bringing that part of it up. And yes, we do watch our housing starts. We actually report it every month to the board because it is a big factor right this minute in the increasing our overall assessed value in the county is the housing starts, because they're up considerably from where they have been in the past, and it's in a lot of it's in the southern part of the county coming from the way. Any other comments?
Yeah.
Mr. Belfield?
Going back to housing.
Yes, sir.
I was listening at a report today on what happened in home sales during the month of September. This is nationwide.
Mm-hmm.
And it said that it increased by 6%.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I was really surprised with the virus we have. And the average house nationwide sold for $325,000.
Yeah.
I said, that would price a lot of people right out of it in this area.
Yeah, we have a chart that looks, so in March and April, new home building and new home mortgages dropped. And from April on, they've been going up ever since. They rebounded almost immediately.
Right.
The numbers have been there. So you, Commissioner, you need to adjust for cost of living when you're looking at that 325, because in San Francisco, $1 million gets you about 800 square feet. So I don't think we're going to do that, but it has been going up. It's been going up for two reasons. It's been going up because people's building bigger houses with more amenities in the houses. But it's also been going up overall because just the size and the expense of housing has been going up some. The average cost per square foot actually hasn't gone up much over inflation for about the last 25 years, but we've been building much, much bigger houses than we used to build, with 3 bathrooms or 4 bathrooms and, you know, all the bells and whistles. So it's a little bit different.
2.5% interest rate on a 15-year loan helps it get bigger also.
My first, my wife and I were talking yesterday, our first one was at 17 3/4. Well, you know.
78, 79.
It was 82, but yeah, it was right after the 81, 82, yes. But
17%.
Yes, killed us. Yes.
Well, we thank you for being here. We look forward to working with you to finish this study up.
Appreciate it.
And I appreciate all the comments from our partners here today. And for the partners in developing this economic development plan for Nash County, our board feels like we took a huge step. We know we were out on a limb. We're not going to let the limb get cut off behind us. We're going to do what it takes to prove that it was the right decision for Nash County. So we continue to need to hear from you as we move forward through this. You let the commission know in your district or any of us that you feel comfortable talking to, and keep feeding us with what you see would be best for all of Nash County, because that's the only way we're going to get it right and serve the whole county. And thank you again for being here today. Andy, you have anything you wish to sum up with in the end?
No, I think Ted summed it up pretty well, got some good questions, answers, and we got a roadmap here that we got to follow. Make it improve it even better.
I agree with you. We've got just a little bit of other county business to do. If there's no more questions, I'm going to take about a 10-minute pause. You're welcome to stay and watch and learn what your county commissioners do in a regular meeting if you like, or you can certainly get back to your duties that you have for today. But I do thank you on behalf of the board for each and every one of y'all been here today. It means a lot to us to see. I asked Susan earlier in the day for a list of who was invited, which she sent to me. I should have got that earlier. But the ones we invited, the majority of them are certainly represented here, and it shows well that we're all interested in this economic development program that we're trying to put together for Nash County.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Would you like me to do the 4 o'clock briefing here or go to the other room?
We've been doing it here. I don't have an issue with that. And what Mr. Lamb is talking about, we do on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, an update on our COVID situation in Nash County. But why don't we
plan on staying here?
Stay right here, it's fine, and we'll just take a short recess and be back here at 4 o'clock. Then we'll finish up the couple of items we have on here. Thank you. It's 4 o'clock, Mr. Lamb, so I'm going to turn it over to you to do your COVID update for Nash County.
Okey doke. Let me unmute it. Can everyone hear me? We're in a different location.
Yep.
Brent, can you hear me?
He said, Jonathan said, hold on just a second.
Okay, he can hear me. He can. Welcome everyone to our Nash County COVID-19 response briefing. It is October 26, 2020. And at this time, we will hear from Mr. Bill Hill.
Okay, let me just say from Friday to Friday, we had a little better week from the previous Friday, which was October 16th to this past Friday, October 23rd. We had 216 new cases. There were fewer to drop in over the weekend in the system. I'm just afraid to say that's an indication of fewer cases, especially with what the country is going through right now in North Carolina, having some of its highest peak surge days on Friday, but I'll talk about that in just a little bit. We've reported that 34, and I've checked it from 2 different sources, 34 dropped in Saturday, Sunday, and today. That just seems extremely low to me, but I did check at Second Source, and that same number showed up again in the system. Wonderful if it's accurate, but we do know that we're having some trouble getting the ones rolling in on the fax machine being reported from separate facilities, as specifically mentioned hospitals, Boyce, Willis, and some of those. But the 34 was the number in the state system we were looking at. We will just see if we have a large number to report on Wednesday that have dropped in, that are out there that we just do not have them accounted for. But again, 34, that takes us to a total of 30, takes us to 3342 today with the 34 cases. If I could back up just a little bit and talk about cases in the country. The other day, I mean, we've seen more cases Friday, 82,000 new cases in the country. It was the highest surge that we've seen. I was seeing quotes in the paper over the weekend like no plateau in sight right now. This previous record, new cases, was July 16th. It was surpassed by 6,000 on Friday. It concerns me that as weather gets colder, people go inside and the contagion tends to spread much more easily than outside, as everyone knows. 13 states have added real peak states. You know, as we started off last spring, a lot in the Northeast, and in summer, more in the Sun Belt, and more recently, in the Midwest. I'm getting more of a global, at least nationwide report today, but I know that even some hospitals are reaching capacity, and Idaho, Wisconsin is talking about setting up a temporary hospital, fairgrounds. We're just seeing a lot of activity, and I get this relative to some degree when we compare our 30 counties in North Carolina, where the secretary, he reached 21st and then added some more, where 50 new cases per population. Having said that, we are still watching this with more than 41,000 people currently being hospitalized in the country. We've seen a 40% increase in hospitalizations in the last month. Here in Nash County, we've reported two more deaths today, and that's a very sad report. So I don't have any other comments. I don't think it right now, except to say we'll watch this very closely and to continue to practice.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Hill? If not, Brent Fisher with Emergency Management.
Good afternoon, everyone. Brent Fisher, Nash County Emergency Management. Call volume for the last 24 hours for 911 was 180 calls for service, and of those, EMS had 53 calls for service. I placed two things in chat today, and really these have already been discussed, but just spreading the information again. The REAL Conference for Virtual Learning, this is the North Carolina Business Committee for Education is hosting REAL 2.0, and that is a link that will actually take you to their website talking about remote education and learning for teachers and also parents. So that's a free virtual conference that anyone can take. And then secondly is the Slow COVID NC app that has been pushed out by the state, North Carolina Emergency Management, as well as North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. So I wanted to share that with you. The last thing I wanted to report on was Tropical Storm Zeta. Zeta will likely bring periods of moderate to heavy rain, gusty winds, and the chance of severe storms to portions of the state later in the day, Wednesday, early Friday. It looks like right now the track of Tropical Storm Zeta is going to cross through the mountains, North Carolina-Tennessee border. So we're looking at the possibility of somewhere maybe a half an inch to an inch of rain, and that could change with the track of that storm. But all in all, we should be getting somewhere around a half inch of rain. But that's all I've got to report unless there's any questions.
Okey-doke. Any questions? If not, anything from any department heads? Community partners, elected officials? If not, thank you all for tuning in, and we will be back here at 4 o'clock on Wednesday. Thank you.
All right, we're now on item number 7, and what we have is a timing issue, and Ms. McGee needed to have these minutes approved today to meet her deadline, and this is from the public hearing that we had at our last commissioners meeting. The minutes are attached, and I'm sure each one of you had a chance to look at them. I just entertain a motion to approve these minutes. Have a motion to approve the minutes. Is there a second to that motion? Second by Commissioner Richardson. Any questions on the motion? All in favor of that motion, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed by a like sign? Minutes stand approved. Anything else, Mr. Lamb, need to come before the board before we call for recess?
No, sir, just come back on the Thursday, the 29th.
Okay. Any other board member have anything like to bring before the board in open session?
Have we got an agenda yet from the school system?
No, I did talk to the superintendent over the weekend and am expecting that today, but when I left, it may well be on my computer now, Mr. Outlaw, but I didn't have it when I left.
Thank you, sir.
But I do expect to have it sometime today.
Okay.
All right, if there's no other comments, I'd entertain a motion to recess our meeting till Thursday, 29th at 6 p.m. That would be at Nash Community College Auditorium. It is a joint school board meeting. It's one of the two that we do each year, one at budget time and then one sometime during October or thereabouts. So I'd entertain a motion to recess the meeting at this time. Moved by Commissioner Leggett, second by Commissioner Wells. Any questions on the motion? All in favor of that motion, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed by a like sign? We stand recessed until Thursday. Thank y'all.